Hello everyone, this is going to be a quick tutorial about making cutscenes because it's something that's come up a few times in our forums and on our YouTube channel. So here it is, how to make cutscenes for your HTML5 game. We'll be using Wait, of course. So first thing to do is you have to go to clockworkchilli.com and then click Get Started Now. This will open the Wait editor, as you know. And we want to skip tutorials for now, and I'll create a new project. Just going to call it cut demo or whatever. Okay, so now we have a nice blank project, and just for the sake of demonstration really, I want to show you how you would also integrate your cutscenes in an existing game. So say that we have a simple game. I'm creating a new scene object. This is part of your hypothetical existing game. And when you click this object, the game is over and you want to show a cutscene. Okay, very simple example. So this is our main games scene. Now I'm going to right click here and add a new file. And this new file, actually I'm going to rename it. I'm going to call it my cutscene .wsc. Now the WSC extension is important because that's telling Wait that this is a scene file. Now as you can see, I can click that and yes, save the changes to the current scene, yes, and this will open my cutscene.wsc in the editor. I click that again and I go back to my games scene that's called scene 1 in this example. So first thing to do is edit the functions of this object. So on click we want, or even on mouse down, I prefer that actually, we want to wait clear scene that removes any objects that are currently on the screen, and wait.load scene, what have I called it? My cutscene.wsc. So now just to verify that this works, I run the game. When I run the game, I see my object, I click it, and everything disappears. It's also loaded the new scene, except the new scene is empty, so we're not seeing anything at the moment. Now let's make this cutscene. Let's switch to the appropriate scene. And let's have a look. I've prepared a few assets for this tutorial. Let's see what we have. We have a background picture to show in the back. We have a female character that I've called Louise, and we've got a male character that I've called Richard. And finally, we've got something to display on the back of the text, just to have a little bit more contrast. So I'm going to select these and drag them into this area to import them into the project. And now I'm going to add them to the scene, starting with the background. Just drag it up here. With your mouse wheel, obviously you can zoom in and out. And if I go to the properties, I want to set the position to 0, 0 to make sure it's exactly in the center. Now, for cutscenes, in most cases, you will probably want to work at a fixed screen resolution. And to achieve that, you just deselect everything and go into the scene properties here and set your preferred resolution. I think in this case it's going to be 1280 by 720. The important bit is that you set the same numbers for min size and max size. They have to be the same. This means you're working at a fixed resolution. So the game will then be stretched to fit the screen as best as it can, depending on the available aspect ratio. So when I run the game now, and I go to my cutscene, as you can see, this fits the available screen space. So the other thing I want to do is import these other assets, and I'm going to have this guy here, it's pretty big, and I'm going to have this girl here. So for the positioning, I'm going to show you a little trick in the properties. Now I know from the sprites tab that the size of this is 512, right? I want to place it exactly at the very bottom here. So I know that the screen is 720 high. So really what I want to do, I can open brackets 720 minus 512 close brackets over 2. As you can see, you can type in arithmetic expressions here if you don't want to open the calculator and do the maths. So it's perfectly aligned with the bottom. Now if I deselect this and select it back again, now the number will have updated to whatever the result of my arithmetic expression was. Anyway, this is just to position these characters in a sensible place. So I'll move her out of the screen. I'll do pretty much the same with him. We said it was a 104 for the y coordinate, and the x coordinate is not so important at the moment. Actually, no, I mean, yeah, I want to move them just for our first iteration. I just want to move him here. Yes, and I want to move her a little bit to the left, so she's also visible on the screen. Okay, so now for these two characters, they're going to have very similar behaviors, really. I mean, I want both of them to do the same thing, essentially. I want both of them to be able to talk. And you can do this in several ways, but I'm going to do it in the probably nicer way, which is that of creating a new file again. And this new file is going to be called talkingperson.js. And it's going to be a behavior. I'll show you what that means in a moment. So now I double click this JavaScript file and I do talking person equals function, and I create essentially an empty function called talking person. Now I'm also doing this even though you don't strictly need it, to give this behavior a name. And I'm also adding a character name for this behavior. So what does this do? Now I save this. I want to go to the scene properties again, and in the scripts tab I need to add my talking person file to the scene. Now once I've done this, I'm able to select a character, go to the behaviors tab, and talking person appears now in the list of available behaviors. If I add this behavior to this character, now he's a talking person, whatever that means, and I can assign it a character name. Now I think I call this guy Richard, and I want to do the same for this lady here. In the behaviors tab, say she's a talking person and she's going to be called Louise. Now for each talking character I want to add an onAddToScene function. And you know, this would be the same, well, it would be similar to doing it here in the functions tab for the character. I could type some code here in its onAddToScene function. However, if I did it that way, then it would only apply to this particular character. Then I would have to copy and paste the code for this character. Instead, if I do it here in the behavior, then this applies to any character that's got this talking person behavior. So in the onAddToScene function, I want to do this.owner.setVisibleFalse. Now, because this is a behavior, this dot owner means the object, the owner of this behavior, the object, that the parent object essentially. So all I'm doing, when the scene is loaded, this function is executed automatically by wait, and I am telling wait to hide the character. I'm also going to create a talk function. Unlike onAddToScene, talk is not called automatically by wait. It's something that we will have to call manually ourselves from our code. So the function, obviously we want to pass in a message, and this function for now is just going to show the sprite. So this owner.setVisible true. Now when I run the game, just to check, I switch to my cutscenes and these characters are not visible. Then let's do this. When let's select the background. Yes. So when the background is added to the scene, it means basically the scene has been loaded. At that point, I'm going to set a timeout with setTimeout for say 1 second, so 1000 milliseconds. And in here, I'm going to say, let's name these objects first. Actually, sorry, this one is going to be called, what did we say, Richard, and this one, the lady, is going to be called Louise. Okay, so select our background again and edit the onAddToScene function. I'm setting a timeout, so after 1000 seconds I go wait.getSceneObject Richard to select Richard and get its behavior, that is the talking person behavior, and talk and say hello world. So I'll expand this so you can see it a little bit better. It's pretty straightforward. 1 second after the background has been loaded, we get the Richard object, get its behavior, and call the talk function in the behavior. At the moment, this will only have the effect of showing Richard, see, after 1 second. Okay, now let's make this talk function actually work. First of all, I want to close this file temporarily and go back here so I can put my text back object on the scene, and I want this to be behind, so let's call it text back. I want this to be behind Richard and Louise, so I'll just drag it here. It doesn't matter if it goes a bit below the screen for this demonstration. What I want to do though, I want to go here in the Sprites tab and edit its opacity, and I want it to be a little bit transparent. Yeah, something like that. Now this also initially will be invisible, so I'm just going to hide it from here. And when we are in the talk function, again, we go wait get scene object text back set visible true, so that appears as well as the character. Now we need some text that is going to be displayed when the character appears, and to do that I'm going to create yet another scene object. But for this scene object, I don't really want a sprite. I want to create a new text sprite, and this text sprite is going to contain a message. Now I'm just typing message so I can actually see my text sprite. And you know, I don't really need the default sprite, so I'm clicking this minus button here to remove the sprite. I'm left with the text sprite that's really small. I want to have at least 48 pixels, and say Helvetica because I like it better. Also Helvetica bold? No, Helvetica will do. I want to have a white color, I assume, because it's let's bring the background back. Let's make it visible. So you see that the text object doesn't have enough contrast here. So we will instead make it white by changing the color to white. Oops. White, there you go. Much more readable, I think. Now it will have a max width, of course. We don't want it to extend past the end of the screen. So now I'm not sure what I should type in here, but I assume perhaps 800 will be alright. Actually, let's try. This is a very long message that is going to wrap around. Yes, it's pretty much what we want. 800, I think, works for this particular case. Okay, so I'll leave it here, but I want to make it invisible. But before I do that, I also want to change its name. So I'm going to call it message text, so I can easily select it from our code. Okay, so when I talk, I want to well, let's create a local variable called message text, which is wait get scene object message text. Yes, and in particular, well, okay, that's it. We want to do message text dot get sprite dot set text message. So this will set our message text into the text sprite, and additionally message text set visible true. We want to display that message as well. Okay, so let's try this now. Actually, let's hide the sprite. Let's also hide the background, and we're ready to try it. Click the object. He comes up and says hello world. Okay, that's I think that's a good first step, but we're not quite done, because we have characters on the left and right hand side, which obviously you do not have to do, but I'm going to show you how to handle this case here. So I think we want to add another public variable here to this behavior, which is side, which is going to be left by default, and it could also be right. Okay, so I think I suggest we have two of these message text objects. So I'll make it visible again, and I'll duplicate the object by clicking this duplicate button here. So, but instead of calling this message text clone, I will call it message text right, and I will call the other one for consistency message text left. Okay, so we have two of these. Obviously message text left is probably positioned correctly now, but message text right isn't. It needs to be somewhere here, so that it can be shown when the character that's on the right hand side talks. So we handle that logic here. When we select the message text object that we want to use, we want to do is the side left. because if it's left, then we want message text left. If it's right, we want the message text right object. I hope you're familiar with this question mark operator. Basically, it says if this condition is true, use this value. If it's not true, use this other value that comes after that comes after the colon. So now unfortunately, I have to go here in the behaviors and remove and re-add the behavior. Not the path behavior, add the talking person behavior. Actually, sorry, let's do this. Remove it, save that, add the talking person behavior, and now I've got both a character name, which was Richard, and a side, which I've just added, and it is left, and it is correct for Richard. Now if I go to Louise, and in the behavior tab, I remove that, I re-add the talking person behavior, retype the name, and use side right. Now the only thing that's left for now is to hide these text objects, run the game, go to our cutscene. He comes up, says hello world. Now at this point I think we want to click anywhere. If we click anywhere, then we get a Louise to talk. Okay. I mean, this is probably better done as a state machine of sorts, but just to keep it simple, we will do it in this way. When we click the background, so on mouse down, we decide what we want to say. Okay, so the first, let's go back to on add to scene. In on add to scene, we say hello world. I mean, Richard says hello world, and I'm going to set a variable on the Wade app object. I'm going to do this so that this variable is accessible from anywhere in our app, from different objects, different functions. It's always going to be there. So Wade app, what are we going to call it? Talk index equals 0. So we know that essentially we've spoken the first sentence in our conversation. So probably not hello world. If it's going to be a conversation, let's say something, hey pretty lady, what's up? And because of the apostrophe, actually I need to use double quotes. So that's what Richard's going to say. Then on mouse down, we increase the talk index, and now switch Wade up talk index. So we can do different things for different cases. Case 1. Case 1, actually let's get the two characters, Richard and Louise, as local variables. And Louise, yes, in object, Louise. In fact, actually, I don't really need the object directly. I just want to interact with its behavior. So I'm just going to get the behavior directly here. So case 1 is Louise, Louise.talk. It's none of your business. Okay, just because she, I don't know, she isn't very nice. You can tell from her face. Okay, so that's what happens in case 1. And at the end, we also increase the talk index. So we will have a case 2 where Richard says something else. well, you could try to be a bit nicer, couldn't you? And case 3, just to conclude this example, she will say, just leave me alone. Right, and then we want the last case, which I'm going to call default. So when we're all finished talking, we want to hide everything, right? So we want to hide Richard, we want to hide Louise, and we want to hide the background, and we want to hide the text. So we need to get all these objects, Richard, set visible false, and we do the same for Louise, we do the same for text back, and we do the same for message text left, and finally message text right as well. Now there's only a little piece that's missing here, but let's try to run it so we will see what is actually missing. Go to the cutscene, it comes up, hey pretty lady, what's up? I click, and she does come up and reply, it's none of your business. However, this is displayed on top of the other character. I mean, we have forgotten to delete this character and his text message. So in the talk function, I would say, we should get all the characters and make sure that they are invisible. And we should also make the text background and text messages invisible. So for the text background and text messages, I'm just going to copy and paste this code that we've just written. And I'll also add a comment to say that we are hiding everything. Yes, and now here we are showing the message. Okay, so we hide everything, but we certainly don't want to hard code the names of the characters here in this behavior, because we want this behavior to be really generic. We want to reuse it in different scenes where there will be different characters and so on. So the best thing to do really is on the onAddToScene, in the onAddToScene function for the talking person, I will set a flag on the owner saying is a talking person, setting that to true. Now, because the owner, because each talking person now has got this flag, I can get all the characters that have this talking person behaviors by doing wait.getSceneObjects is a talking person true. So this is getting me all the scene objects that have this flag set to true, and then I can iterate over them. I equals 0, I less than talking.length, I plus plus, and talking I dot set visible false. This hides everyone that's got a talking person behavior, and then it shows the message. So let's try again. Go to the cutscene. Hey pretty lady, what's up? It's none of your business, just leave me alone. Oops, I've probably missed something here. So why is it not working as I would have expected? Because she's saying it's none of your business, and then this should, I'm incrementing the talk index twice. Okay, that's my mistake. I really don't want to do that. I need to increment it only one. That's why this was essentially just skipping a line. Let's try once more. Here, she talks, he talks, she talks, and we're done. It's the end of the cutscene. Okay, now this is a very basic way of doing things. If you want to make it a little bit nicer, create a path that goes from here to here, and then you could say if you want it to be linear, cubic, quadratic, or whatever, and you could animate the position and the opacity at the same time, so he comes in and fades in at the same time, and all that. Actually, do we want to do it? Yeah, go ahead. Let's have opacity set to 0 here, and opacity set to 1 here. The position, though, needs to be 104. Oops, 104 for how did I do that? 104 for both node 0 and node 1. Okay, so the position of node 1, I think it's not quite right, and node 1 I want it to be somewhere there, I think. Yeah. Now we'll see what it looks like, really. The important thing is I'm going to give this path a name. I'm going to call it path left. Yes, and then I have to do exactly the same thing for path right. But I'll show you how to use it first. So the path that we want to use is very similar to what we did here. Actually, let's just copy and paste this code here. But it's not get scene object, it's get path that we want to use, right? And it's not called message text left, it's called path left. And again, this could be called path right for the other character. So rather than, yes, I'm setting it to visible, but I also want to say this owner set path. Yeah, so the owner at that point will follow the path. Let's see what it looks like. It's easier if you actually see it. Okay, you can see that yes, you can see that he comes in and fades in, although it doesn't look quite right because I think there is one frame. Yeah, you could see that. One frame, he's already here in the correct position, and then he appears and fades in. Now, the way to deal with that, I mean, there are several ways of doing it, but I would say let the owner do a simulation step. So let the owner go forward one step before it's actually had a chance to draw it. And if we do that, now it works flawlessly. Okay, so we need to do the same for path right, and I want to essentially create a new path that this time goes from here. We said the y coordinate needs to be 104, and you know how I'm creating these node paths. I'm creating them by pressing the N key on the keyboard. Okay, so 104, and I think she needs to start a little bit further out, so 765 perhaps, and maybe end up somewhere around 450. I don't know. We'll see what it looks like. It can always be adjusted later. Same thing I did before. Set opacity to 1 on node 1. Set opacity to 0 on node 0. And what did I do for this? Oh yes, call it path right, or it will not work. And cubic is out. is the type of motion that I have set for, oh no, I haven't set it, it needs to be set on here, cubic is out on node 0. Cubic is out. And as you can see, when I do that, it changes the distribution of these dots, just to give me a little preview of how it's going to work. So now I press play, and as you can see, it's so much nicer now. And so, yeah, I mean, you could make the text fade in, and you could make it nicer still. But I think this should be enough to get you started with cutscenes for your own game. Of course, if you want, you just can watch it in full screen, which is just a little bit nicer. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it's been useful. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel so you will not miss any new tutorials. Thanks for watching.